So we're jumping into tonight's topic, uh, rheology. We all hopefully know what rheology is. I think it's about understanding the characteristics of your product. So you understand what products to use, why are you using them in that area. I think this is a talk that hopefully most of you guys are starting to have that conversation amongst yourselves, and amongst your industry peers, so that you guys can understand kind of what products you want to use, why you want to use it. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think there's any product that you can't use. You just have to understand where it fits in your portfolio. They're all tools in your toolbox. And you don't necessarily need to use everything that everybody else uses, in a sense.
Yeah.
You just have to understand what it does for your patients and your demographics, and understand why it does that. And that's all you really need. I think then it comes to, picking and choosing, and you can explain it through rheology on why you chose that for your patients.
Yeah, I
Right.
think I totally agree with you. And I think that rheology is why we choose what we choose to put it where we choose to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we don't know rheology, we don't know why we're putting something where we're putting it.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually tell people you need to know rheology, and we're going to go through the different aspects with you. And you need to know rheology so that whenever anybody comes up with a new filler, you can, like say a hyaluronic acid or whatever, you can kind of say, well, what's this? What's this? What's this? And then you can have an idea of those variables. When you put those components together, you kind of have an idea of maybe how that gel or product might behave in the tissue.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
it gives you kind of a little bit of a backdoor knowledge of what these products are.
Exactly. All right. So I think we have a small little PowerPoint just to quickly go over on rheology. So can you guys pop it up?
They'll pop it up in a second.
Ultimately, this is short. This is just basics,
Yeah,
hopefully, for you guys.
there we go.
So hyaluronic acid, what is it? Actually, it's a naturally occurring
Mm-hmm.
polysaccharide. It's actually found in our skin, hydrates, lubricates, and stabilizes connective tissue. So what you guys don't realize is hyaluronic acid is formed in our skin naturally, and it holds, as you can see, 1,000 times its volume in water, thereby adding, you could say, the plumpness, the dewiness to your skin. And so this is the reason why ultimately, as we age, when you have that collagen network that holds all of the hyaluronic acid in place in your skin starts to break down, and your collagen starts to disappear, starts to break down, the elastin starts to break down, you start to lose the integrity of your skin. Well, that means now your hyaluronic acids are not being able to hold in there as well. And so this is the reason why we're doing lasers, and our next AI will be about lasers,
Mm-hmm.
and skin stuff. But ultimately, when you have the right balance, good collagen, your hyaluronic acid holds into place. That's how you stay youthful. And so your body produces hyaluronic acid on a daily basis, and it breaks it down on a daily basis. It's just, unfortunately, as we age, when you have breakdown in your skin, you get less HA in there, and that's how wrinkles start to form.
Yeah, so think of hyaluronic acid when you see it in a filler, when you see it in something, even a skincare product. Think of it as a water magnet.
Mhm.
It's going to hold over 1,000 times its weight in water. That's a lot. So when you have a product that has a high hyaluronic acid content, it's going to pull more water to itself. So just kind of know that and know what to expect with some products. And we're going to kind of explain more the interaction of hyaluronic acid in dermal fillers, but just kind of know how that goes.
Yeah.
And like Dr. Kwok said, the older we get, the less we produce. So that's why our skin gets dry. We don't hold as much water, and we break it down every 24 hours and manufacture it. And the reason that the fillers don't break down that quickly is because they have cross-linking, which we're going to be talking about.
Yes. So how are these HAs made? So HA typically actually comes in a powder, and then they mix it with water. And what they get is different lengths of HA, whether it's long chains or short chains, and then they can kind of figure out which parts of the HAs, these chains they want to use, whether it's all long chains, whether they're shorter chains, or they want a combination of long and short chains. And so ultimately, they add in a crosslinker. BDDE is typical crosslinker, and it literally kind of holds things together. Now, how the eventual HA product comes out is something that the companies have their own things, their own processing. It's kind of like when you create wine. It's yeast, it's water, and grapes. How they mix and mash all of it together and it comes out as that wine versus that wine is really just dependent
Yeah.
on the ingredients and how they used it, the time, the temperature, how much, stirring and whatever they do to it to get it to the consistency and to the product that is come out. So we'll never know that, because if we did, we would probably be killed, because they make millions of dollars off of their little inventions.
That's a deep, dark secret, kind of like where they lock away Coca-Cola,
Yes.
the recipe. Yeah, every company's got their own way of doing this.
Yeah.
So that's the secret part.
Yes,
That's the secret part.
That is the secret part. So ultimately, you guys have to remember that HA fillers, or HAs themselves, the hyaluronic acids have bonds in between the HA that link it together. And so when you're breaking down with hyaluronidase, it's those HA things that are breaking down, those bonds between the HAs that are breaking down. The actual cross-linking using the BDDE is not the part that breaks down. So you guys have to understand that there is a difference when you're looking at HA fillers and cross-linking. There is a correlation with stronger cross-linking or more cross-linking that it's harder to potentially break down. But the breaking down of your HA product is not the actual cross-linking. It's actually the HA bonds. I kind of talk about it as like Christmas lights.
Yeah.
Every little light is an HA, and the little connections between each light are the HA bonds. Those little bonds are the what's hyaluronic acid or the Hyaluronic will break down. The actual plugs, where you plug them together, those are your cross-linkings. Those will never break down.
Yeah, and I want you to, a good way to remember that is that what we break down hyaluronic acid with is called hyaluronidase. It's not called BDDE-ACE,
Yes.
right? So we're not breaking down BDDE, we're breaking down hyaluronic acid, so it's hyaluronidase. So that's an easier way to remember that maybe. And Dr. Kwok mentioned about cross-linking. There's different amounts of cross-linking in these products.
Yep.
So these products might have less than 1%, and they might have upwards of almost 10%, 8%.
Yeah.
And we need to know that what the cross-linking does. Now, keep in mind, cross-linking has a tendency to not let something want to move too much. It kind of holds it together. And I want you to think of cross-linking as a big, like a rope fishnet. And if you have just one rope holding fish in, it's going to stretch a lot. And if you have 8 ropes all tied together, it's not going to stretch as much. So kind of get a picture in your mind of cross-linking as being kind of like that fishnet, not letting something expand. It can expand a lot or it can't expand much because there's so many ropes around it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Cross-linking is one that you just have to know that it's about how it holds the structure together in a sense. I think when we've gone through the labs in Galderma, they were telling us if you gets past about that 9-10%, you get almost like a solid HA, which you essentially is going to mimic actually an implant. And that's not kind of what we want to be injecting into our patients. We don't need to inject implants, even though these are more softer types of implants that we are injecting. So you're going to probably see most of our cross-linkings under probably that 8-9% range. As it gets into the 10%, you're going to really have much more firm projects. It's
And
like
there's more
having
reactivity.
more gelatin
Yeah.
into your
Yeah.
Jello. The more gelatin you add, the stiffer it becomes.
There you go. Yeah, I love that. That's good. I love that analogy. It's
I
good.
do too.
And 2, we have something called G prime. So another part of, like, we've gone through cross-linking, okay, and the hyaluronic acid content. I guess let's go back a little bit. Hyaluronic acid content. That's our first of our rheology. So we talked about hyaluronic acid, how it is a water magnet. The more hyaluronic acid you have, possibly the more hydrophilic it is. The less you have, the less hydrophilic it is. So when we're talking about hyaluronic acid content, I want you to know that When you look at products and you see something that says 20 milligrams in a product, that is neutral. That's pretty much net neutral. It's not going to pull more water in and expand and fluff. It's going to pretty much stay where it is when you put it in. So what you see is what you get. And that's why certain products that I like a lot of the Galderma line, all the Galderma line is 20 milligrams. So I know it's not going to fluff up later. Some of the other ones, the Juvederm Ultra, Ultra Plus, 23, 24, that's not a bad thing. They're made to fluff. That's why people love them in the lips. They're made to kind of give you a little bit extra fluff. So when after that first couple weeks, when fillers kind of settle and bruising and swelling go away, you get that kind of a rebounding little fluff of the product, and it kind of helps negate that initial settling, I should say.
For sure.
So that's not a bad thing. So just kind of know around 20 milligrams is net neutral. And then you kind of get into other things. Are they pre-hydrated? Are they not hydrated? There's a lot of other things we're not going to get into. But just know 20 is midline.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very, very correct.
Yeah.
Then you were talking about G prime.
G prime. So we go to G prime, and G prime has to do just in general with the lifting capability. There's a lot of other things involved with cohesivity and all that. We're just going to talk about firmness and lifting capability. So on that G prime scale, it might go from 13, 1200 all the way down to 150 or lower.
Very little.
So that's the lifting capability on a certain scale of certain products. So say the highest G prime product of hyaluronic acid fillers that are FDA approved in the United States is Lift. Lift is the firmest, highest, got the most lifting capability. That's also a particle-based filler. So it's kind of like a sandcastle that's being built. So that's kind of that one. The softest one that's soft and stretchy in the United States now is Refine. So that's the softest product. I always tell people it's kind of like strawberry jam. It's just really soft. It's like really soft and stretchy. But that's very soft. So where you put your products, you choose them according to their G prime. So if somebody has a nice little round face, if somebody has a rounder face, I'm not going to put a low G prime product in them because I'll lose it. I'll never see a difference. I'm going to go to a higher G prime product to help give a little bit of, you can kind of lift that heavier tissue in the position you want it.
Exactly.
And if somebody has a very, very, very thin face, you don't want to put a high G prime product in them. They'll look like their cheeks, they'll look like Maleficent. So you need they'll just look too hard and firm. So you have to go down in the G prime to a medium or softer to help someone have a softer look. So you pick that product according to that patient. So that is G prime. That's kind of the lifting capability.
Yeah. Then you have your viscosity, elasticity, how much stretch your product really does have, and that's going to determine where you want to place it. You know, if it's very viscousy, you may not want to put it under an area that has high mobility on the bone because you may get some migration of the product. If it has a lot of elasticity, you may want to put it above the muscle so that when the muscles are moving, the elasticity stretches it out and you're not going to get clumping up. You don't want a really high, very, very low elasticity type of product, one that doesn't stretch, to be above the muscle, because when you're smiling or moving your areas that are very high movement areas, you're going to potentially see the product bunch up, or you may see the product kind of just move along with the actual muscle itself. And so that's not really what you're looking for when you're trying to really work on the naturalness of the area. And so definitely your viscosity elasticity to me helps determine kind of the different planes you may be injecting into. You know, and there are some studies that are coming out, you know, certain products actually under the guise of muscle movements can change the viscosity and the G prime
up to like 1,000 to 2,000%.
And so you definitely have to take that into consideration. And these are things that we're just continuing to learn about these different products. It's just not just injecting it just because injecting it. Well, what could potentially be the long-term effects of a product when you inject into the area? Could there be something different that happens to the product with motion, with the muscle kind of moving over it? We're still going to continue learning. I'm sure we'll find more and more things to learn about these products as we go along.
So and the two things you mentioned, so just know when we're looking at Rheology, you want to know if it's stretchy or if it's not stretchy. Like, is it elastic or is it not? Some of the products that aren't elastic are the particle-based products, you know, like the Lift Rustling Silk. What else is not elastic at all. Most all of them have a little bit of stretch to
Most of
them.
them have a stretch. I
Yeah, most
think
everything has
those are the
stretch
only
beyond
ones.
those. Those don't stretch at all. So when you put something in and you don't need it to move and you want to stay where it's going, and it's not an area that moves a lot, put something in that doesn't need to stretch or move. Like Dr. Kwok was saying, when it goes superficially and you're around areas of muscles that move, pick something that moves with that patient. You're going to give them a much more natural appearance and a much more natural look.
Yeah. Particle size can determine where you want to place it. I think more particle size, I think the only one that really has the true particle size is going to be the Restylane Nasha products. Your Restylane Lift, Restylane, and your Restylane Silk. The rest of them, do some of the products have calibration where it's kind of like you're squeezing molasses or pudding through a meshing system
Yeah,
versus actually a gelatin.
right.
I think when you're talking about particle size, it works more if it's more of a gelatin and you're pushing through a mesh system, you get more consistency in a particle size. But ultimately, if you have pudding and it's a little bit more firmer-ish pudding and you're pushing it, you can get a calibration size. So there's an equalness. There's not like big and small. There's more equalness through that calibration, but it's still not
Yeah.
a true particle size. That's a little hard to grasp on that
It
aspect of it.
is. It's just,
Um,
yes.
and then of course, if they
It's a
want more,
particle. It's a piece, but it's not a particle.
yeah, exactly.
It's a piece of gel, but it's not a particle. It's kind of weird.
So you definitely want to just choose your dermal fillers according to what your patients need. And I will definitely say Lori and I differ in certain areas where I like certain fillers. I can get away with certain fillers. It's understanding these characteristics that help you say, you know what, I want to use, a high G prime. So for me, underneath the eyes, I think a lot of people talk about it and they use much softer ones. They're
Yeah.
using a Restylane or a Belotero or things like that. I personally, I love Restylane Lift in the area, but it's understanding the characteristic that you can figure out how you're going to place the product, where you're going to place the product in the area to get you the results that you're looking for. So don't base it off of the fact that it has this kind of characteristics, and so I can only use it here. At the end of the day, you can play with any of these products, inject anywhere. If it has a very low G prime and you're trying to build a cheek, you could do it, but you're going to end up using a ton of fillers to actually try to build up that G prime, and you may end up getting more movement on that area because, the tendency is a lower G prime product is going to be a little bit more elastic, a little bit more viscous. And so those are the things that you need to think about when you are choosing your products. I always tell students, you can choose and inject any product anywhere. Just like I think Kiss is one of those products where I think the Restylane fam people did do a beautiful job of marketing it, but they pigeonholed themselves because they
Just
named it
lips.
Kiss. So everyone thinks of it as lips, lips, lips. But honestly, I play with it underneath the eyes. I play with it periorally.
Mhm.
I play with it on the outside of the face. I think you just need to understand the characteristics so you're going to utilize it for what you want it to do.
Kind of like Contour. Contour came out. It's FDA approved for mid face and zygoma. Okay, it's like a pillowy kiss, is what it is. Same cross linking, just a larger calibration, not a particle. But everybody, it was marketed for cheeks and mid face. Well, I looked at the Rheology and I went, I like kiss in the lips, and this is fluffier and more pillowy. I'm going to try this contour in the lips. Oh my God. It's amazing.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful in the lips. You can't make a lump if you try. Well, don't try, but
You could.
It's so, yeah, I guess anything, but it's so soft and it's beautiful. So if somebody wants a little bit more of a bigger lip plumper, I go to Contour. If they want just hydration or a little lip gloss, I go to Refine. Those are kind of, and I like Kiss, but I've kind of gone to two that aren't really made for the lips or FDA approved for lips. But I mean, that's because of the Rheology. It's like we look at those and we're like, oh, this might work really good here because it's got these attributes, and then try it. Try things, you guys. I mean, don't get pigeonholed. Think out of the box. Use your critical thinking to go, this looks here, this G prime and this cross linking, and it stretches or it doesn't stretch, and this might look good here on this patient, and try them. I always say when you start using fillers, or when you have a new filler, it's like having a baby. You're getting to know it. You're kind of getting to go, how does it behave? What does it do? Do I like it here? Do I like it there? You're kind of getting to know it. And then you get to learn and trust whatever filler you're using for what type of tissue and skin you're using. So allow yourself time to learn
And
and to kind of try things.
give it some time, let it settle in, and see what it does. There are certain ones that I got to try out. I gave it a try. I gave it a second try, and those ones didn't wow me. They ended up not lasting as long, and so I'm like, okay, that's not going to be part of my
Those are the ones we couldn't
portfolio.
feel because we never use them.
Those are the ones that I was like, you know what? As much as I do love the idea of it, maybe it's a cheaper filler, maybe it blah blah blah. Ultimately, you need to use what is going to be best in your hands for your patients. I think that the difference in pricing on the fillers is fine. Hopefully the swing isn't huge, huge, huge. But at the end of the day, make sure that you guys do charge. I think we need to get out of the habit of having patients pay for a syringe or understanding that they're paying for the syringe. Instead, that they're paying for the product, but what they're paying for is your expertise, your artistry. It's kind of like I tell people, when you go to your hairstylist, they're using the same coloring agents as everybody else. They're using the same scissors as everybody else. Um, but what comes out of their hands and what comes out of their techniques and whatever their artistry is going to be completely different from hairstylist to hairstylist. And that should be the same with you guys and your fillers. It should be an individual artistry based off of what you like. And don't be so closed off. I just use this and I'm only going to use this. I will definitely say I love my rest and lift. I'm a huge rest and lift fan. Now the contour's out, I'm kind of like, it's kind of starting to take over some of my rest and lift that I used to just exclusively use rest and lift for these areas because I liked the way it did certain things. And so ultimately, I think that you need to be open-minded and give fillers a try. I'm not closed-minded. I will give it a try. The new RHA 2s, 3s, 4s came
Yeah.
out. They're the most recent ones that have come out. I'm playing around with them and I'll create my own opinions about them as I see the results on my patients. Remember, you can't judge these fillers until you let it sit in the patient's face for a couple of months. And then you can really kind of judge and see, did you like it? Did you like the way it feels? Is it going to add more extra benefit to your patients from what you currently use?
Yeah, I agree. And some products have a tendency to kind of blend more as they sit. They kind
Yeah.
of just seek their own level.
Yeah.
So you have to know the behavior of those products, like the
Mhm.
RHAs. Sometimes they'll just kind of, you
You
put them
blend a
in and they
little.
just kind of blend
Yeah,
in beautifully.
for
But
sure.
like I might put it in one area if I want a bunch of lift because I don't want it to kind of blend out. I want to put in areas where I want just a soft little fill. So just know how they behave. And like you said, how they behave in a few months down the road. And then you're going to be able to kind of choose your favorites and use what you're more comfortable with as you go along.
Yep. All right. So, Rheology, I mean, ultimately, this is essentially what you're utilizing your fillers for. We're using it to
Yeah.
lift, we're using it to fill contour or revolumize the area, which most of are using. I think most of us tend to use fillers to fill, revolumize. There are some of us that use it to lift, and I think there's arguments on both sides. Lifting using fillers, using the ligaments, can you tack it down?
Yeah.
I'm a big,
Yeah.
huge fan of that. I think if you revolumize in the right areas, you can lift the face back up, but that's for a different topic. Skin strengthening is a great one. Dr. Vanajik talks about that using Restylane to kind of help strengthen the skin, but I think it's a combination of using product with the actual needle creating
Yes.
some
Yeah.
some
Fibroblast. Yeah.
fibroblastic activity. It's a little bit more, you can say, like collagen induction
Mm-hmm.
therapy
Mm-hmm.
in a sense into the area. And then in Europe, they do a lot of skin boosting. You use it a really thin HA filler to actually do hydration of the skin. Typically, those are going to be very, very, very low, if like almost no G prime, because you don't want it to, expand the skin and give fullness and projection off the skin.
And
So I
there'll be
think of G
something
prime as projection.
there'll be something coming from one of the big pharmaceutical companies soon. They'll be FDA approved for skin boosting here
Nice.
in the United States. So
Very
I'm not going to say
cool.
what it is, but
We'll look out for it.
it'll be nice. It'll be nice.
All right. So this is a great little chart. This kind of summarizes, and these are independent values from all the different companies for all the different fillers that we currently have on the U.S. marketplace, and you can kind of just see naturally where our x-axis is going to be your flexibility, and your y-axis is going to be the G prime. So that y-axis going up and down, you can see the highest G prime is wrestle and lift, and
Mhm.
wrestling right underneath it. And you have your volbella. Oops, they spelled that wrong. Volbella, a little bit kind of close into the lower end, but you can see closer to zero on the x-axis means the flexibility. So there's not much flexibility in a
Mhm.
product right in that area. And so as you go further out on that spectrum, you're going to see more flexibility. That's where your refine is the most flexible. But you can see it's low on the G prime, so it's not going to give you very high lifting capacity. So, take that chart and utilize it as something to give you a guideline of where these fillers kind of fall into place, and see if it does that for you in your hands. I think that definitely these laboratory values come from labs, so it's not in vitro or in
Mhm.
vivo studies. These are literally, they take the filler, they machine press it down, see how much it stretches, and all of that stuff with the torquing. So it still is going to be different once you place it into your tissue and how the tissue reacts to your filler.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's all different. Everybody's tissue is different. So just keep in mind. I oftentimes like to say, try to replace like with like, and kind of. I mean, that's a general guideline, kind of like Jack Sparrow would say. It's general guideline. So if you're trying to lift, replace bone, if somebody's had some bone resorption, pick a firmer product.
Mm-hmm.
Pick a firmer product to mimic that bone and give you more lift. If you've lost fat pads, pick that middle product possibly, depending on their anatomy, but you might pick something a little bit softer in that middle area to kind of mimic the fat pad. Depends on the depth of the fat pad
Yep.
again, but kind of think about where it's going and what it needs to mimic and what it needs to do. Here's my general guideline. When you have a really high G prime product, when you put your needle in, I want you to have a down comforter over your needle. So when you tent it, you have a down comforter.
Mm-hmm.
When you go down to the middle G prime, I want you to have a blanket over your needle. So when you tent it, you have a blanket. And when you go down to the really low G prime, really soft materials, I want you to just have a little sheet over your needle. So just a little sheet. So if you have a down comforter, if someone has cheeks, thin face, you can't put something that requires a down comforter over it to hide it, can you? You have to go down to something that has to have just a blanket. So if somebody has thin zygomas, go down to something where you don't have
Mm-hmm.
need as much adipose tissue to hide it or much.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So, you guys may, can definitely take another picture of this if you don't have it. You guys can put it up there for them.
There you go.
Yeah.
Take a picture. This is a
Take
great
picture.
referral, you guys.
Sorry for some of the misspell.
Vovella.
Things.
Is that
Volbella.
something new?
No.
Vovella. Sounds like
But
deodorant.
ultimately, it's something
Volbella.
that, you guys should be utilizing earlier on, just to kind of get your gauge correct. You can see majority of all of these products are in that lower G prime range, in the middle G prime range, and kind of in that middle flexibility. And so that's where all of these kind of play around
Mm-hmm.
in general. Okay. So just in summary, kind of rheologic components, your HA content, as we said, 20 milligrams, kind of net neutral-ish. Cross-linking determines kind of, you could say, stiffness of a product for the most part. Breaking down, has to do with some of the cross-linking, but it has to do with also the HA concentrations, and whether it's long chain, short chain type of HAs,
Yeah.
and how they make it. Particle versus gel.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think this is really important. I think the particles are not actually injected correctly, in my opinion, because they're particulate, versus a gel being a little bit more expansive, a little bit more like, I call it like soft gummy bears in a sense, or
Yeah.
more like pudding. It kind of has its amorphous hold together, versus a particle, you inject it over here and it travels over here. You can't really get it to bunch up together because it's a particulate. It's like sand.
Yeah.
You pour sand over here, you're not going to get the sand to move over there, and you press on it and the sand flattens out. You're not going to be able to get all the sand back up into a hill again. And so that's very different than having a regular type of a gel, where potentially that gel kind of holds itself together, and kind of you can get away with not being as specific. I think if you're using a particle gel, what it is about being more precise about why you're injecting it and how you're injecting it.
Yeah, and some of the gels will kind of have a tendency to integrate better in the tissue. So
That's
there
true
are
too.
some that integrate nicely. So if you make a mistake with some of these gels and you make a lump, you can just go, and the lump's gone. So some of them are very forgivable,
That's true.
and they integrate very nicely in the tissue.
Yeah. Elasticity, stretchability determines kind of like where your depth is. I think the more elasticity, the more you can put it into areas that high mobility, especially around the mouth area. I think high elasticity is great for those. And then lifting capacity, G prime, is if you're looking for projection. Where do you want projection? You're going to choose something that has a little bit more high G prime. So,
Yeah, and one other thing that we didn't really talk about was cohesivity. And some of the products are very cohesive and some aren't. So they might be gels, and some of them kind of stick together in a tribe, and some of them will just kind of disseminate a little bit easier. So you can have different gels that behave very, very differently.
for
So,
sure.
did we confuse you guys?
Hopefully not.
This is such good stuff to know, and we have both gone out and taught people who have done this for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they've never heard the word rheology. So because you guys have listened to this tonight, you're a step ahead of some people who've been doing this for years and years, and it's really important to know. And you can kind of see by what we've explained tonight that you can kind of use your critical thinking, and you can kind of choose products according to what your patient needs. If they have a thin face, if they have a medium face, if they have a round face, where do you need to put products? How much lifting do you need? Is it going to be mobile? All these variables play into your choice of what you're going to choose for your patients. And that's really important to get the best outcomes.
Yeah, don't pigeonhole yourself just because that person on Instagram uses only for that area, blah, blah, blah. Create your own artistry for yourself. All of this stuff is really, really dependent on what you feel is necessary for your patients. You know, I think I'm always really, really kind of, yeah, I guess you could call it play. It's playtime at the end of the day. I don't think you should be restrictive of where you can and cannot put these products. I think it really, really just comes down to understanding the characteristics of the product that allow you to play in different areas. Especially, you know, sometimes I'm doing lips and I'm like, oh, I don't need all the kiss that I use in there. Where can I put it? You know, sometimes
Anywhere.
I put it in nasolabial, sometimes a marionette, sometimes I actually will put it underneath the eyes. Ultimately, I don't think there's any wrong filler for any area. It's just understanding why you're using it there. If you can explain to yourself why you're using that product in that area, then you have a good reason.
Yeah.
I think if you're just doing it, just because I saw somebody else do it, that's not a good enough reason. I mean, you need to understand for yourself why you're using that product. Does it have the right G prime? Does it have the right flexibility? Is it the right area for you to be injecting that type of a product?